About wrong stuff before we get into it. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, but so thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm actually quite flattered and excited to be here, since I'm a very strong believer in the power of having different viewpoints when you make decisions. The more viewpoints you have when you tackle a problem, probably the better solution you're able to produce. And if I think of my experience mainly in the Nordics and in Finland, I think the social sciences, or the human sciences as you call it here, are more or less lacking from the decision making when you make the viewpoints. So I think this is a great initiative, and especially Anni's goal number 2, I can really fully subscribe to. But so glad to be here. Yes, so the title was Human Perspective on Corporate Life. So my perspective is how to bring the social sciences in. And like Anni said, it is a leadership and management perspective. And the context is the financial industry or banking. And when I say banking, I talk about the incumbent banks, the universal banks, i.e. the banks who service all sorts of customers who have all products, and mainly I talk about the cross-border big banks. Because that's what I know. And I guess that brings me, before I really get into the topic, so maybe a little bit more about me. So why should you actually listen to me? I've worked in Finland, in the US, and in Denmark. In the banking sector, and banking sector, I've been in sales, I've been in business development, I've been in product units, and I've been maybe half of my career I've been leading cross-border teams with people who have very sort of multi-professional backgrounds. But my education, I've been always sort of the odd one out in the financial sector, since I'm a political scientist by training. I have a degree from the US in international relations, and then a degree in political science from the University of Helsinki. I wrote my thesis on human rights in Finnish foreign policy, which of course then is a kind of direct continuum to the banking, right? But anyway, so then after about, I think, 10, 15 years of banking, I actually also got an MBA in finance. So I thought I'd better find out what this is all about. But my identity, sort of I don't know if you can call it academic, but sort of my educational identity is very much with the social sciences. I used to introduce myself in the bank saying that I'm a very decent human being, although I'm a banker. And I credited that decency much to my education. Not everybody thought that was funny. I thought that was really clever. But anyway, so that's about me, and that's where I come from. But so about the role of social sciences in business, and in this case in banking. So I thought I'd approach it from the digitalization perspective, since that's what the banks have been talking about for the past couple of years, and then the sort of the strategies that the banks have come up with. But before we go there, just to sort of have us all on the same page, let me try to paint briefly the sort of the landscape of banking at the moment. What are the challenges that the banks are facing, and what are the problems that they are trying to solve? So I think you could say that the challenges come mainly from 4 directions. The customers. The customer's always the difficult one, right? That was sarcasm, by the way. So customers, regulators, competitors, and then the macro environment. Customers, when we talk about the incumbent, the big banks, they have a large customer base, each one of them. And at one end, you have those customers who would much rather have sort of a traditional approach to banking. That can be corporate or individual customers. They want to meet or have very traditional ways of doing their banking. And then in the other end of the continuum, you have the ones who would rather go to a dentist than see a banker, right? I mean, there's actually research on that. So the ones with the traditional preferences are extremely expensive for the banks. And the ones with the more modern preferences are then very, very demanding, and they don't compare banks to banks. They compare banks to wherever they do their online shopping or whatever they do on the online. And I don't know if there's any bank people here, but usually those customers are not very happy with what the banks have to offer today. Right. Then talking about the regulators, so one, there's a lot of it. I know every industry is complaining about regulation, but banking as such is and actually should be regulated very much. So there's a lot of regulation which demands a lot of resources that could be put into servicing those customers better, right? Another thing that the regulation does is it's kind of pulling the banks in two directions. Part of the, say, the anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist financing legislation or demands from the regulators are very sort of manual. They expect the banks to do a lot of manual know your customer work and actually have rejected a lot of the digital ideas that the banks have had so far. That is changing slowly, but anyway, so it's sort of pulling that way. And then you look at PSD2, which is the open banking regulation, which is going exactly the opposite direction. You know, you need to open your data for competitors, and you need to be able to develop digital services on top of the data that you have. So kind of very conflicting pulls and demands for the banks. Which of course then brings us to the competition. So there we have the fintechs, the smaller companies who are usually doing something, not the whole product offering, but they do something very well. They look at lending, they look at cards, they look at blockchain and documentary payments, that sort of things, and they do it extremely well. And the incumbent banks have a hard time competing with that sort of small niche operators. And then, of course, we have the big data houses, the Googles and the Apples and the Amazons of the world, who are also looking into the market of banking very, very hard. So those are the demands. And then there's the macro. I won't go into that. But as a former banker, I could talk about the negative interest rates forever. It's really, really squeezing the banks and forcing them to look at their cost base. And that's kind of also pushing them probably towards the digitalization. So that's the landscape. Those are the problems that the banks are trying to solve, and then they come up with their digital strategies. And I don't know what you have seen, but I see a lot of the same. You know, you take Danske Bank's strategy and you take the logo off and you put on Nordea or DNB, and you can't really say who's who. And there's the products, there's the apps that they're producing. A lot of them, I think at one point, all of the banks wanted to be dashboards or platforms that aggregate the services, and they are the ones who bring not just banking, but insurance and buying and selling a home and different subscription services on the same platform. Everybody had the same idea. I haven't seen anybody really doing it well yet. There's some initiatives, but no. And then, of course, the more advanced one is then the data analytics. So the banks say, okay, now we have all this data and we can analyze it and we can sort and shuffle it, and then we will be able to produce these targeted offerings to our customers based on understanding the customer. The customer understanding, of course, is understanding what they did before, right? So the same old, I guess you could say, strategies for digitalization. Why is that? I think this picture that I will now hopefully show you by clicking here. There we go. This might explain something about it. If you look at this, what is the motivation for digital transformation in finance? So the motivation for banks. Makes perfect sense, right? Improve efficiency, generate growth, don't make mistakes. But if you think of it, so whose perspective is this? Is that the customer's perspective? No. Is that the employee's perspective? This is the shareholder perspective, right? The owner perspective. And it makes perfect sense. You know, of course you need to do these things. But if you think of, you know, trying to solve those problems that I was trying to kind of paint to you just now, how creative can you be when you have this sort of framework to look through? You know, don't make mistakes, right? You know, grow, damn it, and be more efficient. Less people, you know, more efficient meetings with customers. So, and what's missing here? This is the very mechanical, financial, probably also legal point of view. Maybe if we had some other points of view, we might end up with other sort of strategies. Actually, I have an example. Who knows Barclays Bank? And Barclays has, I think he's still there, and now I'm embarrassingly forgetting if it's Stephen Roberts or Robert Stevens. But anyways, he's a geologist, and he's Barclays strategy transition, digital transition strategy head, or something like that, right? And so in 2013, he's moved from running an organization of 5,000 people into being him, his laptop, and a PA, and trying to think of, you know, how to take the bank digital. And one of the ideas he gets is that let's put Wi-Fi in all the branches. So remember, this is 2013, so Wi-Fi was not what it is today. So let's put Wi-Fi in all the branches. Okay, does it improve efficiency? We don't really know. Does it generate growth? We don't know. Is it a mistake? Probably. It will leak out. It's not only in the branch, so other people can use it, and you know, what's really the point? But that's what they did, and some funny things happened. So they thought that maybe our customers will be then more willing to download some of the apps when they have a Wi-Fi in the branch, but they didn't allow their employees to actually use their mobile devices in the branch. But let's not go in there. But then what happened was that they saw that taxis started to line up outside of the branches because there was Wi-Fi. People started to go to the branches or in their neighborhood of the branches to use Wi-Fi. And after a while, some developers and some sort of small fintech companies and other companies said, could we maybe use your premises in the evenings when you're not there, because you have you have the Wi-Fi, and we could use that. And so things that they didn't actually see started to happen. And as a byproduct, also the customers started to download some of the apps that they had. But like I said, if it wasn't for the geologist who was thinking differently, maybe the guys who look at these icons wouldn't have come up with that sort of strategy. And then again, if you think of the customers, so customers probably answer these things because these are the options they were given in a survey. But the Barclays customers started to use the mobile banking because they actually wanted to use the Wi-Fi, right? So something totally different than you would come up with if you just have this sort of framework that you use. So you see what I'm getting at. I hope I'm not laboring the point. But if you really, really restrict yourself and your viewpoints when you're trying to analyze the problems, you're really restricting the outcomes. And I think that is so much what I have seen happening in business life, where I've been. But so another point that then I would like to make is then about, let's assume for a while that you have the perfect strategy, either by this framework or some other way, but you have the perfect digital strategy, and then you start to execute it. And you have your, you have your risk assessment in place, and you have your compliance in place, and you're following up, you have your finance and accounting and performance management, and you have your technological solutions, so you have everything. But, there's all sorts of studies, but, you can say maybe 80 to 90% of strategy executions fail, right? You have the perfect, brilliant strategy, and you just don't get it done. And, all managers understand that it's not the technology, it's not the risk management, it's not the performance management, it's the people that you're actually leading. So you don't manage P&L, you don't manage your balance sheet, you manage people. And you need to make people want what you want, right? Otherwise you're coercing them. So you need to understand what makes them tick. And every manager knows this, but still it's not happening. It's happening somewhere, but on large scale it's not happening. And I wonder why, And I think here also the social sciences, the human sciences could be of such great help to businesses when they execute their strategies. I've said, and a lot of other people have said, that banking is people and business is people. But when you sort of embark on a journey of executing a strategy, and if you would like to somehow apply more the human sciences, if you would like to have a more structured approach to how you lead and manage people, at least I haven't really seen any tools that could be used. There might be some tools, but they're not in the corner office. They're not with the management teams. And there's no language. Somebody talks about emotional intelligence. Yeah, wow. But there's no language to talk about these things, really. Which means that if you don't have words, it's very hard to think, right? And close to impossible to communicate anything. So there's sort of no lingo for these sort of things in the manager's mind or in the manager's surroundings. And when you have no tools, you have no words for it, it's quite hard to focus on it, or quite hard to kind of separate the challenge that we have, and this is what we really should be doing. And thus, the manager, the leader, takes a great personal risk when trying to really apply these things. I wanted to make a big cultural change in Danske Bank Finland, which I was country head of. And when I started to talk about cultural change to my management team, they were looking at me like, what is she on, right? And then they go, okay, but yes, you can have an HR project. You can have a cultural project. I said, I don't want an HR project or a cultural project. I want a business project. I want a culture that helps us achieve the targets that we have set ourselves. And they go, So what I'm saying that when you don't have the right language, you don't have the tools, it's so much harder to do stuff. It's so much easier to fall back on the finance and accounting. I can talk about managing capital forever. I can talk about, credit risk, market risk, compliance risk, regulatory risk, you name it. And there's always language for it, and I can appear like a very competent leader in front of anybody. When I start to talk about, how do we actually lead these people? How do we actually make a cultural change? How do we make these people want what we want? Then I lack those tools. And I think this if and when this can be slowly changed, and this is a bit different in, I think, outside of the Nordics. We are so very mechanical engineering focused. But when this can be changed, I think we can make, like I said, we can make better decisions, and we can also execute better on those decisions. So congratulations for taking this initiative, and thanks for inviting me, and hope you will have great success and good luck with all of this. Thank you.